this CUnity webinar on enterprise mobility. I'll be your host. My name is Brant Henney. I'm the Marketing Director at CUnity. If you have any questions that don't get answered during today's session, please note my email at the bottom of this slide. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see my screen. If you cannot, please use the questions or a chat window in the GoToWebinar control panel to let me know if you have any difficulties. I have had phone situations in the past where it's cut out and I've had to dial back in quickly. If that happens, let me know through a chat and I'll let you know. I'll dial back in. So very quickly, just as a reminder, this is the first in a three-part series. Today we'll be talking about strategies for enterprise mobility. Next week at the same time, we'll be discussing the CUnity mobile product, and we'll be talking about a success story with the International Monetary Fund, and we're very lucky to have a representative from the IMF who will be discussing the project. So that'll be a great session. And then on October 31st, on Halloween, we'll be doing a sneak preview of a new product called CUnity Slices. Halloween costumes are optional for that one. And as a thank you to everyone who's attending all three of these sessions, we will be entering you for a chance to win an iPad 3. And we'll be announcing that winner on our Facebook page. And you can go to Facebook and search for CUnity, and we'll come right up. So let's get things started. This is a lot of material to cover in a half-hour session, so we'll try and keep things brisk. And this is by no means a technical breakout session. This is really designed to give a broad overview. We'll be looking at mobile device trends over the past year and doing a bit of a reality check. And then we'll look at some of the risks and opportunities that are posed by having enterprise mobility in your organization. And we'll want to recognize important issues such as getting your users behind any plan that you have, keeping your data safe, making sure that you're applying goals that meet the usability needs of your teams, travel, international concerns, making sure that you're budgeting correctly and accurately ahead of time. And then we'll take some of those issues and build a rough framework for a mobility success strategy. And then some next steps on things that you can do immediately following the call to get the ball moving. And then with time provided, we'll do some Q&A afterwards. So I'd like to kick things off with a story about the U.S. Air Force. In 2010, they built their own supercomputer as an alternative to standard off-the-shelf enterprise parts. This was a high-powered computer, still is, that is responsible for radar enhancement, pattern recognition, processing satellite images, even doing research into artificial intelligence. Incredibly high-performing machine. It also performed these tasks at 5 to 10% of the cost had they used traditional hardware resources. And it also did it at 10% of the power consumption. And what was this supercomputer built with? It was built with Sony PlayStation 3 consoles. They built a network of PlayStation 3 consoles together to build this supercomputer. So you're on an enterprise mobility call. Why am I telling you about Sony PlayStations? The message here is not to dismiss consumer electronics, consumer hardware, and looking at this end of the market. We're at a point where we can't be dismissive about this line between enterprise solutions and consumer solutions. We also can't be dismissive about users, where we have people entering the workforce who grow up not remembering life before the internet, much more tech savvy than they ever have been. We also have a huge developer community building applications, and these devices are already cost optimized. When I referenced that 5 to 10% of cost, that was in 2010 when these devices, these consoles cost $400 a piece. Now they're at almost half that, and we haven't even reached the 2012 Christmas sale. So, you can see that the consumer side of electronics has a lot of upsides that previously have been discounted. So let's get back to mobile devices, as much as I'd like to talk about PlayStation 3 all day. So let's do a reality check. So mobile devices, it's not really fair to say that they just appeared in 2011, 2012. They've actually been here for a while. We all remember the Palm devices and our Blackberries chipping away on our quote-unquote crackberries on business trips and using devices that way. But there's something different about this convergence in 2012 to create this bring your own device tsunami. So where does this convergence come from? Three areas in play. The first is cost. These devices are cheap. They're getting cheaper, especially relative to traditional enterprise smartphones like Blackberries were a few years ago, and versus laptops that we're starting to see a competition of hardware technology sources. Capabilities. I have a 17-inch laptop that was state-of-the-art a couple of years ago, and I look at an iPad 3 screen, and it dwarfs the resolution and the technology and the specs, the hardware state, the solid-state hardware memory. These devices are incredibly powerful and getting more powerful all the time. And then, as I mentioned before, an ecosystem of third-party developers that are monitoring industry trends, and they're waiting and looking for opportunities and gaps to fill to provide new applications at a low cost to users. So that's where I really see this convergence to create this tsunami. Now, that's one thing for me to make those assertions. I think it's another to quantify some of the growth with hard data. And I think this will help draw a fine point around the actual rate of growth and the size of the opportunity. So if we look at the number of iPads, there were 15 million shipped in the first quarter alone of 2012. And using that same 15 number, the iOS, the latest operating system for the iPad and iPhone, had a 15% adoption rate in the first day. And I believe that within 2 days it had reached 50% adoption. That's an incredible adoption rate for a major operating system overhaul. There's a 50% increase rate of the adoption of tablets, not just Apple, but all tablets in the enterprise year over year. But out of all workplace device activations, 27% reported were iPads. And then finally, industry analysts are projecting that by the end of 2012, we'll see $10 billion spent on iPads alone. And that's not even talking about smartphone devices and other tablets. So that's a huge amount of growth in a single year, and there's really no data points that point to this trend slowing down anytime soon. So that said, with those types of numbers, I think we've really demonstrated that this is a trend that is going to continue to go in the direction of adoption. So understanding that this is really sort of a fact of nature in the workplace, let's take a quick look at some of the strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats that applying mobility to enterprise content can pose. So I think the strengths are probably the most intuitive. Obviously, your users are more mobile. It means their information is available all of the time. That results automatically in greater user productivity because they're not stymied by having to be in a certain place at a certain time to access data. It also has a dramatic impact on decision making. You can make decisions rapidly with access to on-demand data, and those decisions are going to be better because they're going to be better informed by having critical data when you need to react to situations. The ease of use is a clear strength, and as I mentioned before, this app ecosystem is adding a diversity and a specificity to applications that are available that have never been there before. But let's talk about weaknesses. I think that a lot of organizations don't understand the total cost, and I've got a costing slide, but in short, I think some organizations just do the math out on what devices cost times X for total number of users, maybe a small number for software costs running on those, but really not looking at the total cost. Next area is durability. Because these are such durable, such portable devices, They're more likely to be kept outside of their case, put in situations where they can come into harm's way. Device management, using a single plan to manage these devices, can become a weakness. App delivery, specifically business to business, Apple has not been completely successful with the iTunes plan when it comes to business delivery. Now, we are seeing providers like Mobile Iron create alternatives to allow business to business type downloads, but it's still not there yet. Of course, if you look at Android, you've got a system that's a little easier to work with in that regards. But I would still put that in the weakness area for now. And then UI constraints. Just because of the way touchscreen phones and tablet devices are set up, they're still really not geared for a large amount of content creation. They're still focused more on content consumption. That may change in the future with a certain paradigm shift in how the physical interface is used, but as of right now, I would still put that in a weakness area. Now, opportunities. Introducing a mobility strategy for your enterprise content will allow you to get in control of a bring your own device trend or catch up to it depending on what state it's at in your organization, and it will allow you to build user advocates, which is a very important point that I'll speak more about in a few minutes. Opportunity here is that there's so many low-risk applications that you can try out the applications that you want and pick the ones that are best versus making large investments and then seeing if they work. And I'll speak about this next point at greater length in a few minutes also. But vendors, because this market is so immature, a lot of smart, forward-thinking vendors are open to customer input and working with customers. That's a huge opportunity for you to help shape the direction of putting applications out that meet your needs. And then overall, there's a huge opportunity for you to increase the productivity in your organization. Threats. If you do not deal with a bring your own device situation well, you can create chaos in the organization, you can alienate your users, and there's a number of threats associated with that. If you do not plan for security correctly, there's a huge potential for security threats. We'll talk about ways you can address that. Data and device loss. Ironically, I believe that it was an employee of Apple that left a prototype iPhone 3 or 4 at a bar, and somebody from Gawker or Engadget wound up getting a copy of it. That really speaks to the ability of these devices are so ubiquitous and portable they can get lost. That's definitely a threat that needs to be planned out for. And really the uncertainty of the roadmap. Because the market is immature, you do get opportunities like talking to vendors and shaping things, but we do have a riskier roadmap, making sure that we make smart choices that are flexible. So now we've identified some of those threats and some of those opportunities. Let's talk about how we can maximize the good while minimizing the downside. Okay, so nerd alert. Why am I putting up a picture of Tron? If there's any Tron fans on the call, this is one of my favorite movies growing up. And if Tron's a hero and there's one thing we know about Tron, it's that he fights for the users. And I think that's an important takeaway, that we want to work with our users and not work against them. That's really key in success, because users helped create this bring your own device situation, but obviously in concert with the hardware developers. Apple built this really sexy, sleek iPhone that helped change the game. They came back with the iPad, and users flocked to them and preferred them. That's what created the situation that we're in today, even though there are a number of other vendors putting out great devices as well. But the users really have driven this. And we need to respect that, and we need to also respect the fact that they may be fickle, they may be picky, they may be hard to please, but they're also smart, and that they pick these devices for a reason. And it's important to understand that in certain situations, you may need to impose a top-down device compliance strategy around your users, but that can be really risky, and I think that only fits a small number of organizations. I think it's important to make users your customers, to make them your advocates, to survey them, to work with them, and not to get too draconian about your mobile strategy in regards to your users, because data security is not a new problem. Now, these devices are more portable, can access things more easily, but the ability to take data away and put it on something portable and remove it from the organization has been around before floppy disks were even in play. So this isn't anything new. What's important isn't to lock everything down airtight and to create an empire that's crushing down on any chance to take advantage of mobile devices. What's important is to create manageable standards and strategies that work with users that try and do the best to preserve security and create a set of standards that will leave people accountable but still be able to use these devices. So let's talk about security. A survey by Cisco in the UK in 2012 showed that the main concern, the main holdback to adopting tablets is security. And that's a pretty intuitive point. I mean, obviously, if security wasn't an issue, we'd probably see even faster rollout. What's important to understand is that there are multiple levels to security. It's not just the tablet. It's not just the smartphone. You've got your server security, where your enterprise content is being stored. If there's a server in between your mobile devices and your ECM server, that's an issue also. And then you have endpoint security, and that's two-pronged. You've got your device itself, and then you've got the application. You've also got platform considerations. If you are using an iOS system, you're going to have a different set of security considerations than if you're adopting a Windows tablet or if you're using an Android device. The open with conundrum. I think anybody that has used Docs2Go or one of the other third-party content editing apps understands that as soon as you use open with, you are creating the potential to move content from one application that you understand to another one entirely. And if your users have their own sets of applications that they can open and work with data, that can potentially create a security risk. So we need to be understanding of some of the solutions that are out there. Are there ways that we can lock down or lock out certain apps and make them unavailable to users? There's a vendor called Good Dynamics out there that works on sandboxing groups of applications so that they work together but don't share data outside of that sandbox. And then there's some broader mobile device management, which is a set of practices around securing devices. There's UDID controls that are ways of remotely locking down devices in case an employee leaves the organization or a device is lost. And then, of course, there's the potential to just use closed networks where devices can't interact with data outside of those networks. So those are all very different ways that we can work with security. Next area is defining usability goals. So we need to look at users, and one of the biggest distinctions isn't necessarily the department they're in or what they're doing day to day, but how they're working with information. Are they information consumers, or are they creating and logging large amounts of information? If they're creating and logging large amounts of information, tablets and smartphones may be a nice complement to what they're doing, but it's probably not going to be an ideal primary device source for them. So you need to profile user groups. You need to understand your repositories. Which repositories need access? It's not worth setting up a huge Big Ten access to all of your data sources and creating a federated connection if 8 out of 10 content sources don't need to be accessed by most of the organization. Third-party app integration. So we need to understand which apps are going to integrate with your primary applications. It's not just one application that's being used typically. You've got a series of them. We need to understand connectivity and data plan costs, which will come into proper costing considerations. And as I mentioned before, there's a diversity of use and a diversity of need. Tablets are not for everybody. Smartphones might be more appropriate in some cases, and in other cases, it may not really be a primary concern at all. But we also do need to be mindful of the fact that some of these users that we deem not needing these devices still are going to have be part of that bring your own device activity. So it's important to have some type of accommodation or plan B for them. So some of the other concerns might be storage and memory. Are you going to use cloud-based services for holding your data or for using applications for sharing and transferring data? How are you going to deal with backup and recovery for data? Mobile devices put a different spin on how those work. And then travel and international. I'm going to assume that a large number of people on the call are not necessarily traveling, working internationally, but there may be, and you may be working with partners who are, so it's an important concern. The Patriot Act for non-U.S. companies will impact whether or not information and data about U.S. users can be sequestered in a legal situation. The confiscation of devices at borders by customs. And I've talked to, I worked at a panel for ILTA, the legal organization at the ILTA conference this year, and we had an IT director from Australia, and he essentially instructs his traveling legal teams to adopt a plan to lose mindset. Don't put anything on the device as you're entering the country, because you should assume that those devices are going to be taken away. And those are all different types of concerns that you need to have. There are other international restrictions on what content is allowed to be taken in and out of the country, and how data plans are going to work outside of your own native country. The next area that we might want to talk about is identifying costs. So obviously devices, as people are using them, they're going to have to be replaced. We need to understand that enterprise level applications are not going to be 99 cents at the iTunes store, that you're looking at server costs, and that you need to understand that it's not just outfitting everybody with five $1 applications and that's the end of it. It may be very cost affordable, but there may be costs that you should be aware of as you're entering a planning stage. There's going to be costs around training. Even though a lot of these applications are intuitive, as we get into more robust interactions with data, some of them may be less so, particularly not just what you need to do to get the bare bones out of an application, but what you need to do to get the most out of it. We need to know about the cost for servers. We need to know about data plans. I've talked to customers that haven't actually talked about sort of the data plan, because they didn't even think that they'd need anything more than Wi-Fi. Well, if you've got traveling organizations, obviously data plan for a whole new set of devices, if you're introducing tablets, can introduce a significant cost. And then the costs around securing content that's independent of a specific application. And then the costs of changing your roadmap. As we see things change, opportunities open up to go in different directions, there's going to be additional costs while this market is maturing. So those are some of the concerns and some of the things we need to look at in terms of opportunities and risks. So taking those concerns that we have identified, how do we move forward with, what would we recommend as a strategy? And what are some of the next steps following this call that we can all do to, make the most out of building a successful mobile strategy? So as I mentioned before, understand the risks and rewards, and don't take my SWOT analysis for gospel. Go out and make your own. Survey your users and consult them about what they see as risks and opportunities. Identify your requirements first, and then identify the apps afterwards. And I'll tell you right now, just talking to users from a broad number of industries, there's no one killer app that will provide you with enterprise content management, connectivity and access, and individual user content editing. So we talked about costing. It's important to go, obviously, into much more detail and understand what the true cost is going to be initially and then year over year. And I think it's important to take a perspective of being both patient and agile and responsive when needed. I've definitely seen this in the past year or so, that things like delivery and mobile device management, things that have been nagging problems, are being solved right and left, but then in turn new problems are being introduced, such as the prevalence of mobile devices, vendor conflicts as we see acquisitions, applications you might have been trusting and relying on no longer become available. It's important to understand, you know, that this is a changing landscape and that we need to be patient but move quickly when needed. And again, security, I can't underscore that enough. Depending on what your organizational needs are, you really need to understand that this is a key cornerstone to making sure that any gains and opportunities that you get from your mobile strategy is not underdone by putting your data at risk. And then looking at devices and apps and the metrics that they generate as an actual resource. I'm not going to really be discussing our products or plugging it, but I will say CUNY Mobile is an example of an application where it hooks into the metrics of use and auditing and monitoring, and you can actually use that to measure how applications are being used. And to the extent to which different applications can do that, I definitely suggest that as part of a strategy. After applications are being adopted, you can actually go in and do some post-implementation review of how applications are being used, and is probably your best indicator of whether or not an application is a success. So as we're getting towards the end of the half hour, what are some of the next steps? So as I mentioned, understanding requirements. Probably the first thing you can do is go ahead and create a checklist with all of your stakeholders that prioritize risks and rewards and balancing those appropriately, and allow that to become the framework for discussion as you architect a solution. What I would also encourage is talk to your ECM or SharePoint services provider. They are oftentimes very well situated to become experts on mobile devices and enterprise mobile solutions if they're not already. And they can help work with you and with your enterprise content management vendor to find a mobile device solution that's right for you. Explore all the options on the market. It's worth spending a little extra time to download and try applications, to go onto forums and chat rooms with your peers and see what's working. Go to LinkedIn, go to Facebook, go to an industry forum and find out what's working, what's not working. And then talk to your users. It's really important that you engage them. I would also say, I mentioned before, talk to vendors. The vendors that are the most interested in making a strong foray into mobile applications are going to be very receptive in working with users. Our webinar session next week with IMF is a perfect example where we worked very closely with IMF to help prioritize application features that went into CUnity Mobile, and that was an example of CUnity being proactive, but the IMF being very proactive, and for mutual benefit. It was a better product for us to bring to market and a more useful product for them to use. So after the session, what I would recommend to everybody is to go ahead and find us on Facebook, as we'll be drawing winners after the third session, and we'll be notifying everybody via Facebook who won and next steps for taking ownership if you wind up winning that drawing. I would also recommend, and you may want to wait till next week, you may want to go ahead and look at it now so that you have an understanding, to go to iTunes and download the free trial version of CUnity Mobile. It's fully functioning. The only limitation is that it's limited to our test servers, but you can go in and do as much damage as you'd like to our test data, and we encourage that. And as I mentioned, contact your app vendors. If you're interested in talking to us, go ahead and do that. If you want to go talk to somebody that's making your content editing applications, go get in touch with them. This market is not mature, and the smart vendors, including us, we want customer inputs, and this window will not be open indefinitely. And I'm speaking broadly of the market, that this level of interaction and opportunity will not be open indefinitely. As the market starts to mature, products solidify, there will not be as much wiggle room for customers to shape priority as we get into more and more mature product versions. To that extent, for users who are engaged and interested, CUNY does hold closed session focus groups where we sit and listen and take notes on customer interests and have discussions that are not based on, advocating necessarily our technology. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining me on this session today. If you would like further in-depth information, materials, I'd like to schedule a demo of any of our products, you just want to find out how my day is going, shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to follow up directly with you. And as I mentioned, the drawing will be held for the iPad after the third session. And I'd like to remind everybody, if you've not signed up, October 21st and on Halloween, we'll be doing demos and case studies of CUNITY products, including CUNITY Mobile and CUNITY Slices. You can go to our website and find out that information, or you can just hop over to Facebook, and we've got those recently posted as well, and you can click over and register for those. So with that, if anybody has any questions or concerns, if they'd like to call my bluff on anything I've said today, press me on something, please feel free to go ahead and enter a question into the question window, and I'd be happy to field those. Okay, well, I don't see any questions coming up in the window, so I'll let everyone go and try not to push this over longer than it needs to. But again, if you have any questions, please email me. There's my email, brant.henney@cunity.com. I'll be happy to follow up with you in depth, and please visit us on Facebook. Use that page to go ahead and sign up for the next two sessions so that you can go ahead and be entered for that drawing to win the iPad, and we'll be having some great discussions with the IMF on their success story and taking a look at some actual products in the next couple weeks to come. And with that, thank you very much for attending this session, and have a great rest of your day. This concludes our webinar today. Thank you.